Well, joining me now to talk more about the situation on the Korean Peninsula is Bruce Bennett, Senior Defense Analyst for the RAND Corporation. Thank you so much for joining us. And first, I want to get your reaction to this report that came out earlier today that the DPRK may have a nuclear weapon.
Well, certainly they've had nuclear weapons to test. The question is, could they deliver it with a ballistic missile? There have been some who have claimed that they've actually had that capability for over 10 years, including Dr. Khan out of Pakistan, who worked with North Korea. But more recently, it's appeared increasingly likely that they would have this capability, and it poses a real threat.
The U.S. Defense Department is sort of downplaying what was coming out. With the threat of an imminent missile test anytime now, could they possibly test their nuclear capability with that missile?
It's kind of ironic. China's fourth nuclear test was on a ballistic missile out over the western part of China. So North Korea's fourth nuclear test could be on a ballistic missile. North Korea does tend to key in on such key events.
Well, what happens then? Because obviously the increased sanctions by the UN haven't really done anything except to increase the tension there. What happens when you have Secretary of State John Kerry in the region and this happens, a test, they decide to test?
Even if they test with just a dummy warhead, it's going to be an issue. There's going to be a lot of discussion about it. North Korea is clearly trying to escalate to get negotiations to come about. But we have to remember what caused this crisis. It was UN sanctions for previous missile test and nuclear test. Do we really want to negotiate with North Korea about their ability to do those things?
So how do you dial it back? How do you bring them to the table?
Somehow we have to find a way for them to feel like they can step back. If they get a successful missile test, they may be able to feel that way. That may also be why they've put 5 or 6 launchers out. Because if you have 5 or 6 launchers and you launch a bunch of missiles, at least one of them is likely to be successful.
Well, and it's getting a lot of attention because you had the U.S. president come out and say, hey, you need to dial it back a little bit. China has appealed for restraint all this week. The G8 ministers meeting in London, they're doing the same. Is Kim Jong-un taking any of this into account, or is he getting the reaction that he wants?
Oh, I think he's getting exactly the reaction he wants. He wants to be on the news. He wants international recognition. And he wants to put pressure on the United States. I mean, his objective ultimately with all of this is to divert the attention of his people away from the internal failings of North Korea. North Korea is not exactly a great place to be living, and he wants to divert people's attention to the external enemy rather than the internal enemy, which is Kim Jong-un.
And we've heard a little bit about this, several reports about him proving himself inside his country. So at what point does he have success? If he gets some sort of approvals from perhaps his father's colleagues, does he stop? If he has a successful missile test, does it end there?
Well, we have to remember he's removed almost all of his father's colleagues, immediate colleagues, from all 4 of the military fellows who were in the funeral are now gone from positions. So he has more of his own people there, but even with them, he's got to prove himself. And yes, I think he's got to have an event which looks like he's proved himself. What, for example, would happen if the extra nuclear weapon they've buried also is tested over the next week? That would seem to be a pretty big success for him.
And then at that point, do you foresee coming to the table, calling on the other countries in the region, saying, now that we've done this, I'm okay to talk?
And if he's okay to talk, what is it we're going to discuss? Are we going to try and give him permission to do that kind of thing in the future? Exactly. But he doesn't want UN sanctions in the future for this kind of behavior or even for proliferation. I don't think any of our countries wants that. So what's the answer here? I think we have to hope that he's prepared to accept the tests as being an end state. That's what they did in 2009. They ended with a set of tests, and that was it. It's not clear what it's going to take this time. He's not his father, and it's not clear who in North Korea is pushing it. Is this really the military that's pushing it?
All right, Bruce Bennett, certainly an ever-changing situation. We'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Certainly. Thank you.
All right.